Jewel beat. Jewel beat. Jewel beat.
Hi there, it's Adam Lockwood from Certainty Asset Management Systems here. I'd like to share with you today some things that are quite often thought of as being more related to corporate finance than as against asset management. And at the risk of seeming to oversimplify things, fixed assets essentially have three phases: planning and acquisition, operating and maintenance, and then disposal and refurbishment. Now, clearly the type of asset that you buy determines the parameters and the extent of the focus in each one of those phases. In this case, I want to talk about acquisition. Now, on the face of it, it might seem to be pretty simple, especially in the case of a property in real estate. You want to derive the benefit or the utility from owning the property, whether that be as an owner-occupier or as an investor. And I guess in the case of an investor, as long as you're generating a good return from that property, then it's all good, right? But what is a good return for your business? Does your business have a clear investment strategy or a clear policy that is based around sound corporate finance concepts? Let me ask you a question. Does your business know what its weighted average cost of capital is? You might say, the what? What do I care what that is? The WACC, isn't that where they play cricket in Perth? Well, no, the WACC's actually a pretty important number. It's a blended rate of what it costs you to finance the assets that you buy and engage in your business. Now, the weighted average cost of capital has a really close relationship with another key concept called the return on capital employed. This is the operating revenue generated by the assets, expressed as a percentage of the cost of those same assets. So, why are these two measures so important? Let's think about it for a second. If you buy an asset that generates an operating return of, say, 7%, well, great. It's better than what I can get by having my cash in the bank. But how much did it cost you to employ the asset? If it cost you 8% to buy it, then eventually someone will lose money. And it's not going to be the banks. Well, it is sometimes, but not often. Generally, the loser is the owner of the business. So, the weighted average cost of capital is based upon another corporate finance concept called EVA, economic value added. Now, this concept is based on the premise that owners of businesses and owners of assets expect to get a return on their investment and that the return should be better in this business or in this asset than what they can get elsewhere for a similar risk-reward profile. So let's look at an example. Say that you use 50% of debt funding and 50% of owners funding. Let's now say that the banks want a return of, say, 5% on their money. And the owners, because they bear more risk and they know that they can get a similar return elsewhere, they want 10% on their money. So these are the two inputs. And again, this is quite a simplified example, but you get the idea. These are the two inputs into the weighted average cost of capital. So based on this debt to equity profile, the weighted average cost of capital is the debt component, 50% of the funding by 5%, add 50% being the equity component times 10%. Now you throw those in the pot and you swirl them around and you come up with 7.5%. So what? The point being is that if the providers of the money, so in this case banks and equity owners, want 7.5%, then in order for that asset to really be generating an economic value return, it needs to be producing a return on capital employed of at least 7.5% or greater. If it's not doing that, then you're actually doing your dough, and the asset is not adding economic value to the business. It might be adding cash flow, but it's not a sustainable economic value added So in short, the operating revenue from an asset needs to exceed the cost of the funds used to acquire those assets. So this goes to the threshold for acquisition costs. It goes to the feasibility of doing redevelopments, etc. So if you buy too many underperforming assets, and your business will eventually have cancer eating its profit and its cash flow. And the cold reality is that in time this will affect your ability to attract finance, both debt and equity funding. So the funny sounding acronym that sounds like the Perth Cricket Ground needs to be understood, and it needs to be embedded into your investment policy. So if you'd like help to review this or to discuss it, then Certainty Asset Management can help you on this and make sure that your business doesn't suffer long-term value leakage. Thanks.
Julius.